Hello, I am Haynes Johnson. America knows me as a mainstream journalist, and I am best known for my contributions to the Washington Star newspaper. I would say I stand out amongst other journalists because 2 years ago I won the Pulitzer Prize for my reporting during the civil rights marches in Selma, Alabama. The Pulitzer Prize is awarded to the journalist who was the best in national reporting, investigative reporting, and public service. With this upcoming Democratic National Convention in Chicago, I should be able to get in the mix and do what I do best. Along with my experience working at the Washington Star for the past 10 years, I have been offered by NBC to be a guest commentator during the convention where I can report on events taking place and hopefully get to interview people attending the convention who have different reasons for attending. NBC is one of the leading news outlets as well as ABC and CBS, being major players in the broadcast field. To stand out amongst these outlets and create the most buzz, I should be doing two major things. First, I need to present my findings in a clear and unbiased manner so that anyone with left or right leaning viewpoints can read and appreciate what is being said. This reduces the risk of any controversy and accusations against our credibility. Secondly, a good journalist should be interviewing people from different sides, such as liberal, conservative, yippie versus anti-war protesters, or experienced political activists versus inexperienced and uneducated protesters. Having opinions from people who identify with these groups gives a better idea of who is attending this convention. Does the news source you journal for have a particular opinion? NBC and Washington Star are both popular news outlets right now. This being said, my competitors, such as the likes of CBS and New York Times, are also looking to get the most traction in their stories and interviews. To play it safe and appeal to all audiences, NBC and Washington Star are going to want me to publish unbiased articles and conduct interviews concerning the events taking place at the convention. While I am engaged in interviews with people who are clearly promoting a certain faction or political party, it's important to ask thought-provoking questions and help the people tuning in understand what the person interviewed is trying to say, rather than it coming off as if the news source is promoting them or pushing their agenda. With that being said, we are still aware of the idea of statements that will be made by certain people who are known affiliates with certain parties, so we do have a role on whose voice is going to be heard the most and whose won't. In 1968 is the U.S. winning the war in Vietnam. Of the people I will be interviewing, I am expecting liberal-leaning politicians and anti-war protesters to be pushing for an end to the war, and generally do not see the war necessarily as a win for the U.S. As for conservatives, they believe the war in Vietnam is definitely being won by the U.S. and is in an effort worth fighting for. With all of this being said, if I'm looking to publish an article getting an opinion on the Vietnam War, I know who I need to interview if my publisher wants me to publish something that gets the viewpoint from one of the two major political parties. I feel like the best opinions on this I could get are from interviewing the big-time politicians attending the convention, because that's really who America wants to hear from the most. What are your opinions on the counterculture movements in the 1960s? If I can do some interviews from people who are part of this movement, such as hippies or the Students for a Democratic Society, that could really bring a good insight into viewpoints of this movement. These groups, I feel like, would have a very strong and positive opinion on this new wave of alternative lifestyle that involves experimentation with style, drugs, sexuality, compared to a much more negative bias towards it displayed by Southern conservatives. Again, I cannot show bias towards or against these groups, but putting their message out there for the nation to see and really covering these small groups is good for making interesting media. The best thing for media is to spark buzz and conversation. People who are unaware of the viewpoints and representation of groups, as I have previously mentioned, may be intrigued by their cause. These groups are an important part to cover at this convention because they represent a part of American people who want to see a radical change in the country and are holding the government accountable for this. All else, it makes for good news and entertainment to be broadcasted to see the diversity of the crowd at this soon-to-be monumental event.